You drive onto the forecourt, you hand over your keys, and the mechanic takes one long look, shakes his head, and slides them back across the counter. He won't touch it. Not for love, not for money. And you're left standing there wondering what on earth is wrong with a car that drove in perfectly fine. Here's the truth. I've spent years piecing together. There are cars on British roads right now that independent garages quietly refuse to work on. Not rusty old wrecks. Some of them are barely 10 years old. The problem was built into them on purpose, and almost nobody warns you before you buy one. I'm going to hand you the whole list. 12 of them. And near the end, I'll show you something buried in a European regulation from 2003, a single legal right most drivers have never heard of, that takes the power back out of the dealer's hands and puts it into yours. You don't need tools. You just need to know it exists. I first stumbled onto this years ago, standing in a cold unit on the edge of Wolverhampton, watching a mechanic I'd trusted for 20 years turn away a young lad in a shiny German diesel. The lad looked heartbroken. The mechanic looked almost guilty. And when the boy had gone, he leaned on the bonnet of my old car and told me quietly, "That engine, son, you have to drop the whole thing out just to change a chain. I won't do it. I can't win." That was the day I started keeping this list. So let me start with the car he turned away, because it's the one that started everything for me. It was a BMW with the engine they called the N47, a diesel, built from around 2007 onward, dropped into more 1 Series and 3 Series cars than I could count. Lovely to drive, smooth, quick, economical, and hiding a design decision so strange that mechanics still talk about it in disbelief. The timing chain, the part that keeps the whole engine in step, was mounted at the back of the engine, not the front where every sensible engine keeps it, where a man can reach it in an afternoon. The back, pressed right up against the gearbox. To change it, you often have to pull the entire engine out of the car, and these chains were known to stretch and rattle and snap long before they should, sometimes before 80,000 miles. Now think about what that means for a small garage. A job that should take 2 hours takes 2 days. 800, 1,000, 1,200 pounds in labor, and if that chain lets go while they're working on it, the customer blames them. So they don't touch it. They send you to the dealer, and the dealer names a price that makes your eyes water. That young lad in Wolverhampton was quoted more than the car was worth. But here's what I need you to understand, and it's the thread that runs through every single car on this list. That chain didn't end up at the back of the engine by accident. Somebody chose that. And once you see why, you can't unsee it. Because the next car proves it wasn't a one-off mistake. It was becoming a pattern. The Mini. The one everybody loves. The one that looks like cheeky British fun. From around 2007, a lot of them came with an engine developed jointly with Peugeot and Citroën, the one they nicknamed the Prince engine. And it had a timing chain problem so common that the rattle it makes on a cold morning got its own name among mechanics. They call it the death rattle. That chain, and the little plastic guide and tensioner around it, wears out early. If you ignore the rattle, the chain jumps, the valves and pistons meet, and the engine is finished. A job that starts as a 40-pound part turns into a scrapped engine, and plenty of independent garages, once they've been burned by one, simply stop taking them in. Too much risk. Too many arguments. Too many owners who left it too late. Now, I want to step back in time for a moment, because none of this used to be true, and that's the part that ought to make you angry. Go back to the 1960s and 70s. My father kept a car running for 15 years with a toolbox, a Haynes manual, and a Sunday afternoon. The parts were made to be replaced. The engine was built so a normal man could reach the normal things that wear out. A points and plug service was a job you did on your own driveway. Cars were designed, genuinely designed, to be maintained by the person who owned them. Somewhere along the way, that quietly reversed. And the people who reversed it didn't announce it. They just started building cars where the servicing was harder, the parts were locked down, and the knowledge was kept behind a dealer's door. I'll get to exactly who did that and why, because it's the black heart of this whole story. But first you need to see how deep it goes, because the next few cars aren't about chains at all. They're about something far cleverer, because the manufacturers found something better than a hidden chain. They found the belt that runs in oil. Let me tell you about the Ford EcoBoost, the little 1-liter 3-cylinder engine. On paper, it was a marvel. Tiny, punchy, one engine of the year awards went into millions of Fiestas and Focuses and Pumas across Britain from 2012 onward, and it used something called a wet belt, a rubber timing belt that runs inside the engine, bathed in engine oil, instead of a chain or a normal dry belt on the outside. Here's the trap. That rubber belt slowly breaks down in the oil. Tiny fragments of it flake away. Those fragments travel through the engine and block the little pickup pipe that feeds oil to everything. The engine starves. And the first many owners hear of it is a knocking noise and a repair bill north of £2,000, sometimes for a car that isn't even paid off yet. Ask around the independents, and you'll hear the same thing over and over. They dread these. Changing that wet belt is fiddly, messy, and if it hasn't been done on time, the damage may already be baked in. Some garages won't quote on them at all, because they can't promise the engine will survive the fix, and Ford is far from alone. Vauxhall did it. Peugeot and Citroën did it. That wet belt design spread across the industry like a cold through a school. So that's the trick, and once you know it, you'll never look at a modern small engine the same way. But a belt and oil is at least a mechanical thing you can point at. The next category is where it gets genuinely sinister, because you can't see it, you can't touch it, and it fails when it feels like it. I'm talking about the gearbox that thinks. Take the Ford Focus and Fiesta with the PowerShift automatic gearbox, sold widely from around 2010. It was a clever dual clutch design meant to give you smooth automatic driving with better fuel economy. Instead, a great many of them shuddered, jerked, and slipped, and the repairs ran into the thousands. It became one of the biggest motoring complaints of its era. Or the Nissan Qashqai and Juke with the CVT automatic, the continuously variable gearbox. When they go wrong, and plenty do, most independent garages simply cannot rebuild them. The unit is sealed, specialized, and hideously expensive. The garage tells you the honest truth. I can't fix that. You need a whole new gearbox, and that new gearbox costs more than the car. Do you see what's happened? A generation of drivers has been sold cars where the most expensive part is designed to be thrown away whole, not repaired. My father would not have believed it. He'd have called it madness. And he'd have been right, except it isn't madness at all. Madness is random. This was deliberate. And now I can finally tell you who did it. For years I told myself it was just cost cutting. Engineers making compromises, accountants shaving pennies. But the more of these cars I cataloged, the more one word kept surfacing, and it's an ugly one. The word is obsolescence. Planned obsolescence. The deliberate design of a product so that it fails or becomes uneconomical to repair after a set period so that you are forced to buy another. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It has a birthday. In 1924, a group of the world's biggest light bulb makers met and formed what became known as the Phoebus Cartel, and they agreed, in writing, to deliberately shorten the life of the light bulb. Bulbs of the time could last 2,500 hours. They agreed to engineer them down to 1,000 hours. They fined each other if their bulbs lasted too long. That is the founding document of the throwaway world we now live in, and it is a matter of historical record. Once you know that story, the cars stop looking like accidents. A timing chain at the back of the engine. A rubber belt bathed in oil. A sealed gearbox that can't be opened. These aren't failures of engineering. British engineers are among the best in the world. These are choices. And the people who benefit when your 10-year-old car becomes uneconomical to repair are the very people who would sell you a shiny new one on finance. But the manufacturers had a problem. Even a car built to fail can be fixed by a clever, independent mechanic with the right information. So they went after the information itself. And that is the real weapon in this war. And the next few cars show you exactly how it's used. Consider the modern Land Rover and Range Rover. Beautiful machines. Also, among the independents, a byword for electrical gremlins so tangled that many won't go near them. Air suspension that collapses. Electronic modules that argue with each other. Fault codes that lead nowhere without the manufacturer's own software. A garage can have 40 years of experience and a wall full of tools and still be locked out because the diagnostic system that speaks the car's language is kept behind the dealer's paywall. Or the Volkswagen Group cars, the Audis and Volkswagens and Skodas, with systems so integrated that fitting a simple replacement part sometimes requires the car to be told digitally that the new part is allowed to be there. They call it coding. Change a headlight unit, a battery, a component, and the car may refuse to accept it until it's been coded in with software most small garages can't afford or aren't allowed to have. This is the quiet trap. It's not that your local mechanic isn't clever enough. It's that he's been deliberately locked out of the conversation between the parts of your car. And when he's locked out, where do you have to go? Back to the dealer. Back to the main stealer, as the old boys in the trade bitterly call them. Back to the highest price in town. And I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now, because I've heard it 100 times. You're thinking this is all very well for people with money, people buying newish cars, people who can just trade up when it goes wrong. You're thinking none of this helps you, sitting there with a car you've already got and no thousands of pounds to throw at it. So let me stop everything and talk directly to you, because this next part is built for exactly your situation, and it costs you almost nothing. The single most powerful tool you have against every trick I've described is not money. It is knowing before you commit. And that knowledge is free. Before you buy any used car, any at all, do 3 things that cost you nothing but a little time. First, type the exact model and engine into a search box along with the words common problems and the word forum, not the sales sites. The owners' forums where real people spill the truth to each other. If a car eats timing chains or wet belts or gearboxes, you will know within 10 minutes because 100 heartbroken owners will already have written it down. Second, telephone 2 or 3 independent garages, not dealers, and simply ask them, I'm thinking of buying this car, this engine, this year. Would you work on it? A good independent mechanic will tell you the truth in one breath because he has no reason to lie to you and every reason to warn you. If 3 garages all go quiet and start sucking their teeth, walk away. That silence is worth more than any glossy brochure. Third, and this is the one my father taught me on a driveway in the rain, listen to the engine from cold, not warmed up on the forecourt where it's been idling to hide its sins. Cold, first thing, from a dead start. That death rattle in a Mini, that diesel chatter, that hesitation, it shows itself in the first few seconds of a cold start and then hides once the oil is warm. Insist on a cold start. If the seller won't allow it, they're hiding something, and you've just saved yourself thousands of pounds with a 30-second listen and no money at all. None of that requires a single tool or a single pound. It requires only that you refuse to be rushed. And refusing to be rushed is the oldest form of self-defense there is. If this way of thinking resonates with you, the idea that the things you own should work for you, not against you, then I should mention that I've written all of this up in far greater depth across 3 books. Reset, Deep Leverage, and The Full Stack. Each one is a different angle on the same problem. Systems built to keep you dependent and the knowledge that dismantles them. They're available in the description below, and if you found value in what I've laid out here, I think you'll find those books go considerably further. They're the kind of thing I wish somebody had handed me years before I was standing in that cold unit in Wolverhampton. Now, back to the list. Because we're not done, and the cars that remain are the ones that catch out even careful people. The Vauxhall with the 1.6 diesel, the so-called whispering diesel from the mid-2010s. It earned a nickname among owners too, and it wasn't a kind one. Blocked filters, oil dilution, and repair costs that made grown men weep. Many independents grew so tired of chasing its faults that they simply stopped accepting them through the door. The older diesels of every badge with the diesel particulate filter, the DPF, clogged solid because they were driven gently around town, which is exactly the opposite of what that filter needs. A blocked one can cost well over £1,000 to replace, and a garage can't guarantee a clean one will stay clean if you keep driving the same way. So they warn you off, or they turn you away because they don't want the comeback. The Fiat and Alfa Romeo cars with the multi-air system, a clever electro-hydraulic gubbins on top of the engine that fails and takes real specialist knowledge and specialist parts to put right. The Peugeot and Citroën 1.6 diesels with turbochargers that choke on sludge if the oil isn't perfect. Each one a lovely car on the day you buy it, each one carrying a hidden clause that comes due later. And then the newest frontier, the one that frightens the trade more than anything that came before, the electric and hybrid cars. The Nissan Leaf, the Toyota hybrids, and all that follow them. Not because they're bad cars, many are excellent, but because the high-voltage battery systems are genuinely dangerous to work on without special training and special certification, and most small garages have neither. When something goes wrong deep in that battery pack, the ordinary mechanic simply cannot legally or safely touch it, and a replacement battery can cost more than the entire rest of the car. That's your 12. The German diesel with the chain at the back, the Mini with the death rattle, the Ford with the belt-in oil, the power shift and the CVT gearboxes that can't be rebuilt, the Land Rovers and the coded German cars locked behind dealer software, the whispering Vauxhall, the clogged DPF diesels, the multi-air Fiats, the sludged French turbo diesels, and the high-voltage hybrids and electrics that ordinary hands can't safely open. Every single one of them shares the same DNA, built to be difficult, built to send you back to the source, built in 100 small ways to make you feel that fixing what you own is somebody else's job, requiring somebody else's permission. But here is where the story turns. Because they overreached. They made the cars so hard to repair and locked the information down so tightly that lawmakers finally noticed. And what those lawmakers wrote down is the secret I promised you at the very start. The one buried in a regulation from 2003 that almost nobody has ever told you about. For years I'd heard mechanics grumble that the dealers held all the cards. Then one afternoon an old boy who'd run an independent garage since the 1970s put down his tea and told me something that changed how I saw all of it. He said, "They're not allowed to lock us out. There's a law. Been there for years. They just bank on nobody knowing about it." What he was talking about is the block exemption regulation. In 2002, the European Union passed a regulation number 1400/2002, which came into force in 2003. And buried in it was a principle that terrified the car makers. It said that vehicle manufacturers must give independent garages access to the same technical repair information, the same diagnostic tools, and the same training that their own dealers get. They were forbidden from keeping it locked away. The point was simple and revolutionary. Buying a car from a certain maker was never allowed to trap you into servicing it only at that maker's dealers. Your independent garage has a legal right to the information needed to fix your car. And crucially, servicing your car at a properly equipped independent garage cannot legally void your manufacturer's warranty as long as the work is done correctly to the right schedule with the right parts. That principle carried forward into later rules and was retained in British law after we left the European Union. It did not disappear. It was simply never advertised, because the people it constrains had every reason to keep quiet about it. Think about what that means for you standing on that forecourt with the mechanic sliding your keys back. He may be right that a particular job isn't worth the risk, but you are not helpless and you are not trapped. You have the legal right to take that car to any properly equipped independent specialist who has the legal right to the manufacturer's own repair data and diagnostic access at a fraction of dealer prices without losing your warranty. The wall they spent decades building has a door in it, and the law says they have to let you through. So the secret finale isn't a magic spanner. It's better. It's the knowledge that this whole system, the difficult engines, the locked software, the dealer-only mystique, was built on the assumption that you would never find out you had a choice. The Phoebus cartel in 1924 bet that you'd never notice a bulb was built to die. The modern car makers bet that you'd never learn about a regulation from 2003. Both bets depended on the same thing. You're not knowing, and now you know. Knowing turns the 12 cars on this list from traps into simple, manageable facts. You know to listen for the death rattle on a cold start. to ask about the wet belt and whether it's been changed on schedule. A sealed gearbox is a gamble, and a hybrid battery needs a certified specialist. And you know that when a job does need doing, you have a named legal right to take it to an independent who can get the same information the dealer hides behind his counter. The fear was the whole product. Remove the fear, and you're just a person looking after a machine the way people always did. Here is what I hope you take away and carry with you, because it matters more than any single car. You were made to feel that the things you own became too complicated for you to understand or control, and that feeling was manufactured as carefully as the cars themselves. It isn't true. It was never true. Complexity was used as a fence, and behind that fence they charged what they liked. If you're the kind of person who has always suspected that things are made to break, made to keep you paying, made to keep you dependent, then you were right all along, and now you've got the dates and the documents to prove it. That's who this is for. People who refuse to be quietly herded back to the dealer's door. So let me ask you something, and I really want you to answer this one down in the comments. Which of these 12 have you owned or nearly bought? Was it the Mini with the death rattle, the Ford with the belt and oil, one of those gearboxes that can't be rebuilt? Tell me the car, tell me what it cost you, and tell me which part of the country you're watching from, because I read every one, and this list grows from what you share. Somebody reading is about to buy the exact car you got burned by, and your comment might save them thousands. If any of this rang true, come and stand with the rest of us who've decided we're done being kept in the dark about the things we own and pay for. That's what this quiet little collection of recovered knowledge is really about. And keep the door on the latch, because next time I'm opening up the used cars that mechanics secretly call the safest bets on the road, the plain, unglamorous models they'd happily buy for their own families, and one of them costs less than you'd ever guess. That one might just be the most valuable thing I hand you yet. That was just the overview. There's so much more, and I keep it for members inside the Old Ways Society, picking up exactly where I stopped here. You can ask me your own question, and a real person answers you, not a machine. You'll belong among thousands of Old Ways folks like you. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel any time. No risk at all.